The rain was coming down hard that Friday evening when Marcus Thompson stepped through the golden revolving doors of the Sterling Crown Hotel. Water dripped from his expensive umbrella as he shook it gently, careful not to splash the pristine marble floors. The lobby sparkled with crystal chandeliers that cast warm light across cream-colored walls adorned with expensive artwork. Everything about this place whispered luxury and exclusivity. Marcus adjusted his tailored navy suit, a gift from his late mother who always told him to dress for the life he wanted, not the life he had. Little did anyone in that lobby know that this quiet moment would become the beginning of something that would change everything about how this hotel operated forever. Behind the mahogany reception desk sat Linda Beaumont, a woman in her early 50s with perfectly styled blonde hair and cold blue eyes that seemed to judge every person who walked through those doors. She had worked at the Sterling Crown for 15 years and prided herself on being able to spot who belonged and who didn't with just one glance. When she saw Marcus approaching her desk, her fingers immediately moved to close her computer screen, and she placed a small sign in front of her that read, "Temporarily unavailable for special requests." Her lips pressed into a thin line as she watched him walk closer, his shoes making soft sounds against the marble floor. The way she looked at him wasn't subtle at all. Her eyes swept from his shoes to his face with the kind of disdain usually reserved for something unpleasant stuck to the bottom of one's shoe. Marcus had seen that look before, too many times to count, but tonight would be different from all those other nights. "Good evening," Marcus said in a calm, professional voice as he reached the desk. "I'd like to inquire about room service options for tonight. Could I please see a menu?" His request was simple, polite, and exactly what hundreds of other guests asked for every single day at this hotel. But Linda's response was anything but standard. She leaned back in her leather chair, crossed her arms over her chest, and let out an exaggerated sigh that could be heard across the quiet lobby. "Listen," she said, making no effort to hide her irritation. "This establishment caters to a very exclusive clientele. People with actual money and proper backgrounds." She paused, letting her words hang in the air like poison before continuing. "That suit might fool some people, but I've been here long enough to know quality when I see it, and more importantly, when I don't see it." The humiliation was intentional and public. A young couple waiting nearby pretended to look at their phones, but Marcus could see them stealing glances. A bellhop pushing a luggage cart slowed down to watch what was happening. The security guard by the elevator shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable but not intervening. Marcus felt the familiar burn of anger rising in his chest, but he kept his expression neutral. His mother had taught him that dignity in the face of ignorance was its own form of power. "I see," he said quietly, reaching into his leather briefcase. "Perhaps there's been some kind of misunderstanding about who I am." Linda rolled her eyes dramatically and actually laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the marble walls. "Oh, there's no misunderstanding here. I know exactly what I'm looking at." Before Marcus could respond, Linda picked up her desk phone and pressed a button with theatrical emphasis. "Richard, I need you at the front desk immediately. We have a situation that requires your attention." Her voice was loud enough for everyone in the lobby to hear, turning Marcus's simple request for room service into a spectacle. Within 30 seconds, a man emerged from the office door behind the reception desk. Richard Hartley, the hotel's general manager, was everything you'd expect from someone in his position at an exclusive hotel. Tall, imposing, with silver hair and an expensive watch that caught the light as he moved. His eyes immediately locked onto Marcus, and without even asking what the situation was, he positioned himself between Marcus and the elevators that led to the guest rooms. "What seems to be the problem here?" Richard asked, though his tone suggested he'd already decided Marcus was the problem. Linda didn't bother lowering her voice as she explained, "This gentleman seems confused about our establishment's standards." I've tried to explain that we have certain requirements for our guests. But he's being persistent. The way she said gentleman dripped with sarcasm, and the word persistent made it sound like Marcus had been causing trouble instead of simply asking for a menu. Richard nodded as if this all made perfect sense, then turned to Marcus with a condescending smile. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside. You're creating a disturbance for our actual guests. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at one of the budget hotels down the street. I'd be happy to call you a taxi." The words actual guests hit Marcus like a slap, but he maintained his composure. Across the lobby, a young black woman named Keisha Davis had been sitting in one of the plush chairs, working on her laptop. She was a journalism student at the local university, and she had developed a habit of recording instances of discrimination whenever she witnessed them. Quietly, she positioned her phone to capture what was happening, starting a live stream on her social media. "You all need to see what's happening right now at the Sterling Crown Hotel," she whispered into her phone. Within seconds, viewers started joining her stream. 10, then 50, then hundreds of people watching in real time as the scene unfolded. Richard stepped closer to Marcus, invading his personal space in a way that was meant to be intimidating. "Sir, I need to see identification and proof that you have adequate funds to afford our services before we can continue this conversation." The request was so blatantly discriminatory that even some of the other guests in the lobby looked shocked. An elderly white woman sitting nearby shook her head in disgust. A businessman waiting for his colleague pulled out his phone and started recording too. But Marcus remained calm, his voice steady as he replied, "Proof of adequate funds. Is that standard procedure for all your guests, or just the ones who look like me?" Richard's face reddened slightly, but he doubled down. "It's standard procedure for certain situations that require extra verification." Everyone in that lobby knew exactly what he meant by certain situations. The code words weren't fooling anyone. Keisha's live stream was gaining viewers rapidly. Comments were pouring in, expressing outrage and disbelief that this was happening in 2025. The viewer count climbed past 500, then 1,000. People were sharing the stream, tagging news outlets, demanding justice for the man being humiliated simply for asking about room service. Marcus slowly reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card holder. It was made of genuine leather with gold trim that caught the light. As he opened it, several cards fell onto the marble floor. Richard bent down to pick them up, probably planning to use them as evidence that Marcus didn't belong there. But as he read the first card, his face went pale. His hands actually started shaking. Linda noticed his reaction and leaned over to see what he was looking at. The blood drained from her face too. The security guard, an older black man named William who had worked at the hotel for 20 years, moved closer. He had seen enough discrimination in his time to recognize it, and he had always felt powerless to stop it. But something about this situation felt different. The way the young man carried himself, the quality of that briefcase, the calm confidence despite the humiliation. William had developed an instinct for reading people, and every instinct was telling him that something very important was about to happen. 8 minutes, Marcus said quietly, checking his phone. "The board meeting starts in 8 minutes, and they're expecting me." Linda's voice cracked as she asked, "Board meeting? What board meeting?" Marcus looked at her with an expression that might have been pity. "It's the quarterly board meeting of Sterling Crown Hotel Group. The one where we discuss things like employee conduct, discrimination policies, and whether certain managers are still the right fit for their positions." Richard was still staring at the business card, reading it over and over as if the words might change, but they didn't. The card read, "Marcus Thompson, Chief Executive Officer, Sterling Crown Hotel Group." The man they had been trying to humiliate and throw out wasn't just a guest. He was the owner of the entire hotel chain. He was their boss's boss's boss. He was the man who could end their careers with a single phone call. The revelation rippled through the lobby like a shockwave. Keisha's live stream exploded with comments and reactions. The viewer count shot past 5,000. Plot twist of the century. Someone commented, "He owns the hotel." Another person wrote, "The elderly woman who had been shaking her head in disgust actually gasped out loud." The businessman who had been recording stepped forward and said, "Sir, I'm an attorney. If you need a witness to what just happened here, I'm happy to provide testimony." Linda's legs gave out, and she had to grab the desk to keep from falling. "This can't be real," she whispered. You're black." Marcus finished for her. "Yes, I am. I'm also the person who signs your paychecks. The person who built this company from a single hotel in Chicago into a $2 billion hospitality empire. The person whose policies you just violated in the most public and discriminatory way possible." Richard tried to salvage the situation, though his voice was shaking. "Mr. Thompson, there's been a terrible misunderstanding. We had no idea who you were. If we had known..." Marcus cut him off. "If you had known I was the CEO, you would have treated me with respect. But because you thought I was just a black man off the street, discrimination was acceptable. That's exactly the problem, Mr. Hartley." Alquist pulled out his phone and made a call. He put it on speaker so everyone could hear. "Samantha, this is Marcus. I'm at the Sterling Crown location on 5th Avenue. Yes, that's right. I need you to implement emergency protocols immediately. We have a code red discrimination incident that requires immediate action. Yes, with multiple witnesses and video evidence. Correct. Immediate termination procedures for the management staff involved." The woman on the phone, Samantha Chen, was the head of human resources for the entire hotel group. Her voice was professional but clearly concerned. "Mr. Thompson, I'm mobilizing the crisis team now. They'll be there within 10 minutes. Are you personally safe? Do you need security?" Marcus looked at William, the security guard who had been watching everything with growing understanding. "The security here is fine. One of them, at least, seems to understand what professional conduct looks like." William stepped forward and removed his cap, a gesture of respect. "Mr. Thompson, sir, I apologize for not intervening sooner. I should have stopped this the moment it started." Marcus nodded at him. "What's your name?" "William Robertson, sir." 20 years with Sterling Crown. "Mr. Robertson, effective immediately, you're promoted to head of security for this location. We'll discuss the details after I handle this situation." Linda was crying now, actual tears streaming down her face. "Mr. Thompson, please. I have a family. I have bills. I've worked here for 15 years. Marcus looked at her with no sympathy. "And in 15 years, you never learned to treat all people with basic human dignity. In 15 years, you never questioned your own biases. In 15 years, you never thought that judging people by their skin color was wrong." Richard tried one more time. "Sir, surely we can handle this internally. There's no need for dramatic action. We can go through sensitivity training. We can change our policies." Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Mr. Hartley, we already have sensitivity training. We already have anti-discrimination policies. I wrote them myself. The problem isn't the policies. The problem is people like you who think those policies don't apply to them." Keisha's live stream had now reached 15,000 viewers. News outlets were picking up the story. The hashtag Sterling Crown Discrimination was trending. The hotel's corporate phone lines were ringing non-stop with reporters wanting statements and customers demanding answers. The crisis team arrived exactly 10 minutes later, just as Marcus had finished his call. 3 lawyers, 2 HR executives, and a public relations specialist walked through the doors with the kind of purpose that meant careers were about to end. Samantha Chen herself led the team. She was a formidable woman in her 60s who had dealt with corporate crises for 3 decades. She took one look at the scene, the crying manager, the pale-faced general manager, the crowd of witnesses with their phones out, and she understood immediately what needed to happen. "Mr. Hartley, Ms. Beaumont, please gather your personal belongings. Your employment with Sterling Crown Hotel Group is terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you out within 5 minutes." The finality of it was breathtaking. 15. Years of Linda's career ended in 5 minutes. Richard's prestigious position as general manager gone in an instant, but Marcus wasn't finished. He addressed the crowd that had gathered, including Keisha, who was still streaming. What happened here tonight is unacceptable. As the CEO of Sterling Crown Hotel Group, I take full responsibility for creating an environment where my employees thought this kind of discrimination was acceptable. He paused, making sure everyone was listening. Effective immediately. We're implementing new policies. First, any employee who discriminates against any guest for any reason will be terminated immediately. No exceptions, no second chances. Second, we're instituting mandatory monthly training on unconscious bias and discrimination. Third, we're creating an anonymous reporting system where guests and employees can report discrimination directly to my office. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. Marcus continued, "We're also establishing a diversity fund. $5 million annually will go toward scholarships for minority students studying hospitality. We're partnering with historically Black colleges and universities to create a pipeline of diverse talent for our industry. And we're implementing a new policy. Every single complaint of discrimination will be investigated by an independent third party, not by hotel management." Someone in the crowd started clapping. Then another person joined. Soon, the entire lobby was applauding. But Marcus raised his hand for silence. This isn't about one incident. It is about systemic change. This is about ensuring that no one, regardless of their race, religion, gender, or background, ever faces what I face tonight in any Sterling Crown hotel. He looked directly at Keisha's phone camera. "To everyone watching this, I want you to know that Sterling Crown Hotel Group stands for inclusivity. We failed tonight, but we will do better. We must do better. And if we don't, I want you to hold us accountable." The live stream had reached 30,000 viewers. The story was going viral in real time. Major news networks were already preparing segments. The hotel's stock price would take a hit, but Marcus didn't care. Some things were more important than money, as Linda and Richard were escorted out by security. Their former colleagues watched in silence. It was a powerful reminder that discrimination had consequences. William, the newly promoted head of security, approached Marcus. "Sir, what would you like me to do first in my new position?" Marcus smiled for the first time all evening. "Mr. Robertson, your first task is to review all security footage from the past year. I want to know if this was an isolated incident or if there's a pattern we need to address." The implications were clear. This wasn't just about 2 employees. This was a complete audit of the hotel's culture. Samantha Chen was already on her phone, coordinating with the legal team. "We need to review every single complaint filed in the past 5 years. Every single one. If there's a pattern of discrimination, we need to know about it." The scale of what was happening was becoming clear. This wasn't just about one hotel. This was about transforming an entire company culture. 6 months later, the Sterling Crown Hotel on 5th Avenue looked the same from the outside, but everything inside had changed. The marble floors still gleamed. The chandeliers still sparkled. But the atmosphere was completely different. Behind the reception desk stood Maria Gonzalez. Promoted from housekeeping to front desk manager after completing her hospitality degree that Sterling Crown had paid for. Her warm smile greeted every guest equally, regardless of what they looked like or what they wore. The numbers told the story of real transformation. Employee diversity had increased by 40%. Customer satisfaction scores from minority guests had risen by 60%. The anonymous reporting system had processed and resolved over 200 complaints, leading to better policies and happier guests. The scholarship fund had already supported 50 students, with 5 of them now working at Sterling Crown Properties. The hotel that had once been a symbol of discrimination had become a model for inclusion. Marcus Thompson stood in that same lobby 6 months later. But this time, he wasn't alone. With him were the 50 scholarship recipients, young people who would have never had the opportunity to work in luxury hospitality without the program he had created from his pain. He addressed them in the very spot where he had been humiliated. 6 months ago, in this very lobby, I experienced discrimination that could have broken me. Instead, I chose to let it transform me and this company. Each of you represents that transformation. Each of you is proof that from the worst moments can come the best changes. Keisha Davis was there too, now an award-winning journalist whose live stream of that night had launched her career. She had been hired by a major news network to cover social justice issues. Her stream that night had been viewed over 5 million times, becoming a touchstone moment in the conversation about discrimination in America. She approached Marcus after his speech. "Mr. Thompson, do you ever regret that it happened?" Marcus thought for a moment. "I regret that discrimination still exists in 2025. I regret that." Linda and Richard felt empowered to act that way. "But I don't regret the outcome. Sometimes it takes a moment of crisis to create real change." William Robertson, now the head of security for 5 Sterling Crown Properties, had implemented new training programs that were being adopted by hotels across the country. His approach, based on respect and dignity for all, had become a model for the industry. He had written a manual called Security with Dignity that was now required reading for all Sterling Crown security staff. The manual's first page contained a simple principle. Every person who walks through these doors deserves to be treated with respect, regardless of what they look like, where they come from, or what we think we know about them. The ripple effects continued. Other hotel chains, seeing both a public relations disaster and the subsequent success of Sterling Crown's transformation, began implementing similar policies. Business schools started teaching the incident as a case study in crisis management and corporate responsibility. The phrase Sterling Crown Standard became industry shorthand for inclusive excellence. What had started as a moment of humiliation had become a movement for change. Linda Beaumont had found work at a small bed and breakfast outside the city. The pay was a fraction of what she had made at Sterling Crown, but the experience had changed her. She volunteered at a local community center, teaching job skills to young people of all backgrounds. She had written a public apology that Marcus had read but never responded to. Some bridges, once burned by prejudice, could never be fully rebuilt. But Linda was trying to build new ones. One small act of service at a time. Richard Hartley had left the hospitality industry entirely. The very public nature of his termination had made him unemployable at any respectable hotel. He now worked in retail, a humbling experience for someone who had once looked down on others. But perhaps that humility was exactly what he needed. His children, who had seen the video of that night, had forced him to confront his prejudices. Family dinners had become opportunities for difficult conversations about privilege, bias, and the harm of discrimination. A year after that fateful night, Marcus Thompson received an invitation to speak at the United Nations Global Forum on Business and Human Rights. His story had become internationally known, a powerful example of how individual action could create systemic change. As he stood at the podium, looking out at delegates from around the world, he began with the words that had started everything. I once asked for a simple room service menu and was denied because of the color of my skin. What happened next changed not just my life, but an entire industry. The speech was broadcast globally, reaching millions of people. But more importantly, it reached individuals who had the power to make changes in their own organizations. CEOs, who had never thought about discrimination in their companies, started asking hard questions. HR directors who had treated diversity as a box to check started seeing it as a moral imperative. The change that had started in one hotel lobby was spreading across industries and continents. The Sterling Crown Hotel Group's stock, which had initially dropped after the incident, had not only recovered but reached record highs. Investors had realized that a company committed to true inclusion was a company positioned for long-term success. The $5 million annual diversity fund had generated returns far exceeding its cost, bringing in talented employees who might have otherwise been overlooked. The business case for inclusion had never been clearer. Marcus established the Thompson Foundation for Hospitality Excellence, using his personal wealth to expand the scholarship program beyond Sterling Crown. The foundation partnered with 20 hotel chains and 50 universities to create the most comprehensive diversity pipeline in the industry. Within 5 years, the goal was to have placed 1,000 minority students in hospitality careers. It was ambitious, but Marcus had learned that real change required ambitious goals. The incident also sparked legislative change. The Equal Service Act was passed in several states, making discrimination in public accommodations a crime with serious penalties. The law was informally known as Marcus's Law, though he always insisted it should be called the Dignity for All Law. The legislation included provisions for training, reporting, and accountability that were modeled on the policy Sterling Crown had implemented. What had started as a corporate policy had become public law. 3 years later, at the annual Sterling Crown shareholders meeting, Marcus presented numbers that told a powerful story. Revenue was up 30%. Employee satisfaction was at an all-time high. The company had won numerous awards for inclusion and excellence. But the number Marcus was most proud of was 0. The number of substantiated discrimination complaints in the past year. It had taken 3 years of hard work. But they had created a culture where discrimination was truly not tolerated. During the question and answer session, a shareholder asked, Mr. Thompson, was confronting discrimination so publicly worth the initial cost to our stock price? Marcus didn't hesitate. If we have to choose between our stock price and our souls, I'll choose our souls every time. But the beautiful thing is, we don't have to choose. Doing the right thing is good business. Treating all people with dignity is profitable. Inclusion isn't just morally right, it's economically smart. The Hotel Industry Journal published a feature article titled "The Night That Changed Everything," documenting how one incident of discrimination had transformed an entire industry. The article noted that in the 3 years since that night, reported incidents of discrimination in luxury hotels had decreased by 70%. Training programs inspired by Sterling Crown's model had been implemented in over 1,000 hotels worldwide. The culture change was real and measurable. Marcus often thought about his mother, who had passed away 5 years before that fateful night. She had always told him to dress well, speak clearly, and never let anyone make him feel less than. She had also told him that with success came responsibility, the responsibility to open doors for others. As he looked at the young faces in the scholarship program, as he read letters from employees thanking him for creating a more inclusive workplace, he knew he was honoring her memory in the best way possible. The Sterling Crown Hotel on 5th Avenue became a destination not just for luxury, but for learning. Hotel management students would visit to see how inclusion could be operationalized. Civil rights groups held events there, celebrating it as a symbol of transformation. The lobby, where Marcus had been humiliated, became a place where future leaders learned that Discrimination had no place in modern business. The marble floors that had once echoed with prejudice now echoed with possibilities. 5 years after that night, Marcus stood in the same lobby once again. This time, he was there to celebrate the graduation of the first class of Thompson scholars. 50 young people who had completed their hospitality degrees and were beginning careers in the industry. Among them was Jamal Williams, William Robertson's grandson, who had been inspired by his grandfather's promotion to pursue a career in hotel management. The cycle of change was continuing through generations as Marcus addressed the graduates. He said, "Each of you carries a responsibility, not just to succeed in your careers, but to ensure that no one ever faces what I faced in this lobby. You are the guardians of dignity. You are the champions of inclusion. You are the future of an industry that must never forget the lessons of the past." The graduates stood and applauded, understanding the weight of their responsibility and the power of their opportunity. The story of that night had been turned into a documentary that was shown in business schools and corporate training sessions around the world. Keisha Davis, now an Emmy-winning journalist, had produced it, interviewing not just Marcus but also Linda, Richard, William, and dozens of others affected by that night. The documentary showed that change was possible, but it required courage, accountability, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. Marcus never forgot the humiliation of that night, but he had transformed it into something powerful. Every time he walked into a Sterling Crown hotel, he was greeted not with suspicion, but with genuine warmth from employees who knew that their CEO had fought for their right to be treated with dignity, regardless of their background. The company culture had shifted from one of exclusion to one of radical inclusion, and the business results proved that it was the right choice. The legal implications of that night continued to ripple through the court system. Several lawsuits using that incident as precedent had been successful, establishing stronger protections against discrimination in public accommodations. Law schools taught the case as an example of how individual acts of discrimination could have corporate and legal consequences. The phrase "pulling a Sterling Crown" entered legal vocabulary, meaning to discriminate so blatantly that it resulted in immediate termination and legal action. 10 years later, as Marcus prepared to retire as CEO, he held his final press conference in that same lobby. Journalists from around the world gathered to hear his reflections on a decade of transformation. "This lobby," he said, "is where I learned that power without purpose is meaningless. It's where I discovered that the greatest revenge against discrimination is not anger, but transformation. It's where I understood that true leadership means turning your worst moments into everyone's best opportunities." When asked what advice he would give to his successor, Marcus was clear. Never forget that every person who walks through your doors has dignity that must be respected. Never assume you know someone's story based on their appearance. And always remember that in a moment you can destroy what took years to build, or you can build what will last for generations. Choose wisely. His successor, Maria Gonzalez, the woman who had been promoted from housekeeping to front desk to eventually CEO, understood exactly what he meant. The transformation of Sterling Crown became a Harvard Business School case study that was taught for decades. Students would debate the decisions made that night, the immediate terminations, the public nature of the confrontation, the massive investment in diversity programs. But the numbers always told the same story. Doing the right thing had been good for business. The company that had almost been destroyed by discrimination had become stronger by embracing inclusion. As Marcus walked out of the Sterling Crown Hotel for the last time as CEO, he stopped at the exact spot where Linda had refused him service. He stood there for a moment, remembering the humiliation, the anger, the decision to transform pain into purpose. Then he smiled, knowing that his mother would be proud. He had not just worn the suit of success, He had tailored an entire industry to fit the values of dignity and respect. The night that had started with a simple request for room service had ended with an industry transformed. The story that had begun with discrimination had concluded with dignity. The man who had been judged by the color of his skin had proven that character, not color, was what truly mattered. And in that marble lobby where prejudice had once echoed, the sound of equality now rang clear and true. Years later, when people would ask Marcus if he regretted anything about that night, he would always give the same answer. I regret that it had to happen, but I don't regret that it did happen. Sometimes the worst moments of our lives become the catalysts for the best changes in our world. That night, I didn't just get room service. I served notice that discrimination would no longer be on the menu, and that has made all the difference. The Sterling Crown Hotel still stands on Fifth Avenue, its marble floors still gleaming, its chandeliers still sparkling. But now it stands for something more than luxury. It stands as a monument to the night when one man's dignity transformed an industry's destiny. It stands as proof that discrimination can be defeated, not with hatred, but with determination. It stands as a reminder that every person who walks through its doors, regardless of race, deserves to be treated with the respect that should have been given to Marcus Thompson from the very beginning. That is the true story of how a hotel denied room service to a black guest, and 10 minutes later, he fired the manager who refused him. But more than that, it's the story of how discrimination was transformed into determination, how humiliation became inspiration, and how one man's worst night became an industry's brightest morning. The Sterling Crown standard isn't just about luxury anymore. It's about the luxury of being treated with dignity, no matter who you are or what you look like. And that is a standard worth maintaining forever.